So why are we here? We're here so that we can all help to stop suicide. And we know that suicide is not inevitable, right? Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa, among his many wonderful and wise sayings, said that hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness. So our sense of hope is what fuels us. Whether you are a loss survivor, suicide loss survivor, you lost someone to suicide, no matter what the relationship is, it has affected you, or you are someone with lived experience, meaning you have either attempted suicide yourself, or you are struggling or have struggled with mental health issues, or you're an ally, you're a friend to somebody who is a loss survivor or an attempt survivor. All of you are welcome. There is a role for all of you in the work that we do. Okay? And our sense of hope fuels us. Our sense of hope plus science and data. It is wonderful to learn how to tell your story. That's a great gift that you can give to other people, is to let them know that you don't know exactly how they're feeling, because everybody feels uniquely, but you have a kinship, and there is a special bond between you when you make yourself vulnerable and you talk about what it is that brings you to this cause. But your story is a first step. For some of the people in this room, it's not the end step. If it's the end for you, that's great. Or if that's all, and I use that word all very advisedly, if that's what you can do and you want to keep it at that, that's a beautiful thing to be able to share your story. But some of the people in this room may want to do more. And that's where we couple hope with science and data. Education is the key to getting people to understand that suicide can be prevented. Not all the time, but it is preventable. It is not an inevitable consequence, certainly not an inevitable consequence of mental health issues. Okay? We hope, I wish my daughter hadn't died 15 years ago when she was 18 to suicide. But that is the reality. And so I marry my story with science and data, and I come out and I can speak to all of you. And you can do exactly the same thing for other people. Okay? So Angela talked about how there has been a dip in the suicide rate, which is wonderful, because these numbers actually, so 2019, you can see it go up, 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 and then in 2019, there was a little decline, 2.3% nationally. And in the US in 2020, there was another 3% decline. In males, that represents a 2% decline, and in females, 8%, which is statistically significant. Yay! Because we're the US and we're very large and we're made up of 50 states plus territories, and should be states, we are always behind a little bit on culling the data and being able to present it. So, for example, the final data for 2020 just finalized a few months ago. So that's why we're a little bit behind. And that gives us a little bit more time to reach our goal for Project 2025, because it'll be 2027 before we have the final data. Okay, so there was this decline, but our work is not finished. Unfortunately, we have several important groups that have not shown declines in suicide. And I'm taking all of this information from our chapter leadership conference that all of us from the chapters, the leaders of the chapters, went to, was it last weekend? Yeah, okay. Last weekend, right. So this is hot off the press. Unfortunately, ages 20 to 34 have not seen a reduction. Multiracial females, and by the way, it is great that we are being able to identify subgroups, that there's interest, there's knowledge, there's science. Years ago, it was all just male, female. So this is really, really good. Unfortunately, the data is not so good for Black and brown youth, especially young Black males, okay? And this is in part, of course, from school to prison pipeline, social, economic inequities, and so on. It's a real problem, and one that we hope there will be people in this room that want to address that through education. And of course, as Angela mentioned, we know that children and youth are experiencing mental health issues at roughly 2 times the rate as pre-pandemic. Okay, but what we've learned, of course, from the dip is that even though there's a global pandemic going on, a certain former leader of the free world predicted that with the pandemic, you're going to see a big rise in suicide. And that didn't happen. In fact, there was a decline. And it's complex why that might have happened. Historically, though, when there have been wars, there's been a decline in suicide rate. And that, everybody's gathering together. We're all in this as a one big community. People are spending more time with family. There are a lot of reasons for this, but it's a good sign. And some of it has to do with stigma reduction. As Angela said, we now have sports figures, we have celebrities, we have gymnasts, we have all sorts of people who are stepping up and saying, yes, I struggle. And in fact, I'm taking myself out of this competition or whatever it is. And they're saying it's okay to put your own personal mental health ahead of representing the US or whatever it is. It's important to be a person first, a whole person. So for years, up until the pandemic, the insurance companies would not pay for you to have a conversation with your doc, right? Your psychiatrist or mental health professional, or any doc. Now, through Zoom or whatever it is, telehealth, these sessions can be paid for. And that makes it so much better for people who live in rural areas, right? Unfortunately, there's an increased incidence of suicide among people who feel isolated. And of course, people in rural areas really are isolated. And then, of course, this greater awareness generally of mental health and suicide prevention that we've seen in the press. So we want you to take the next step. Help us help others, and together we can stop suicide.
So we want to talk about some of the things that your support has enabled and really the opportunities to continue to expand what we do with our education outreach. And AFSP has come a long way with our prevention education in the last 3 to 5 years. For a long time, we had Talk Saves Lives, More Than Sad, a couple of programs. Now we have an extensive list of programming that's targeted to different audiences that allows us to really make a difference in a lot of communities. So just a couple of highlights. So we helped to pilot the Talk Saves Live for Corrections module at Vandalia State Prison down in Southern Illinois. We have begun delivering in-person programs, Finding Hope, which is a program designed for people who are helping people with lived experience. So it's really about helping the caretakers. It also helps inform people who in the lived experience community on things they can do to help themselves as well. And there is a version of it supporting those at risk that we have presented virtually that has gone with this. Dimple and Meg and I forget who else all has been involved in our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion panel series, have provided a lot of great conversations, getting into specific issues in specific communities that don't get enough attention in the mental health and suicide prevention field. We've implemented More Than Said, Talk Saves Lives, It's Real, College Students and Mental Health, and several of the folks here, Dimple, Mike Duffy, and then Steve Moore, who's not here, have been very active in the Key Stakeholder Coalition for the 988 planning, which is not part of the education, it's really part of the advocacy piece. So a couple of other highlights, hosting Research Connection, which Angela already talked about. Those are great discussions, and the fact that they were done remotely was wonderful for me because it saved me 3 hours of driving in and out of Chicago. I could actually, just take part in the hour and a half that they generally walk. Fundraising through the community walks. Steve Moore organizes a Race AFSP program for the Chicago Marathon that is, for years, been the most successful non-walk fundraiser for AFSP, and is really a great opportunity for people. I will hike 26 miles. I am not running 26 miles, so I have never taken part in that and never will. There is too much weight coming down on these ankles to be running that far. Representing the chapter, we've done a number of media interviews. We get opportunities from time to talk about mental health outreach, to talk about signs of suicide, to talk about the elements of what we're doing that can make a difference in saving lives. And we've had those opportunities regularly in podcasts and presentations, and we want to do more of that. So we actually are looking for more people who are interested in speaking for AFSP. We also collaborate with community leaders. We're making a real focus in our diverse community outreach to make sure that we are helping save lives across the state and in the various communities within the state, as well as definitely doing a lot of promotion for the work of the chapter in our communities and social media.
We were able to bring back 4 awards for the Illinois chapter. And this is really thanks to you guys. I mean, we're all in this picture smiling and looking very proud, but the reality is that these awards reflect all the work that our volunteers have done. I mean, as well as us, but really you guys. So we were able to get, of course, the Race AFSP. The marathon was the highest non-walk event, as Mike was saying. We were able to get, of course, for the Chicagoland Walk, perennially the largest walk in the year in the country, and we were able also to bring back an award for our advocacy efforts, which is really, really great. And again, part of the work that everybody does as a volunteer. And then we were Chapter of the Year, Large Market. So that's also a great award. And thanks mostly to you all. And here's the team, and we were very happy and excited to get all those awards. So I just wanted to take a minute, and some of you in the room know Rick. So Rick started this chapter. He was instrumental in making it what it is today. Illinois is one of the strongest chapters in the country. Rick served in almost every leadership position you can imagine within AFSP, the Chapter Leadership Council, the Public Policy Council. He was the first volunteer who ever received the Volunteer of the Year award at our Chapter Leadership Conference. Definitely just one of those people that everyone seems to just think about when they think about AFSP, and especially the early days of AFSP. And so Rick served as our board chair for many, many years, and as a co-chair for the last several years, and was an emeritus chair. So Rick, unfortunately, had a very short battle with cancer that ended last Thursday. Well, not this last Thursday, Thursday before. And so he is no longer with us, and we just wanted to take a minute just to recognize how important he was to many of you in the room, to this chapter, to AFSP, and just to say forever in our hearts. And here he is wearing his Hope Walks Here shirt. And, you know, it goes on. He has asked, his family has asked that all donations be forwarded to the Chicagoland Walk. So he's continuing to work for AFSP, and just a wonderful volunteer and missed by many. So wanted to give just a shout out to Rick there.
So as I talked about, we have a lot of great programs that are specifically targeted to various audiences. So the Talk Saves Lives, we've had that standard presentation for a long time. We have a Spanish version of it. We definitely need more Spanish language presenters, absolutely. We have a version focused for senior citizens, for our older populations, one for the LGBTQ plus population, the firearms community. There's definitely a lot of benefit to reaching out to the firearms community and including a real significant discussion about lethal means safety as part of that. We have new programs. Angela mentioned the workplace program. In the last few years, we have seen businesses start to engage on mental health in a way that they have not in a long time. So it's great to see that we finally have businesses recognizing that mental health of their employees makes a difference. The corrections program, which we were fortunate enough to be able to pilot at Vandalia and hope to be able to expand and get more outreach. And then a veterans program, which is coming soon. So there are a large range of specific versions of Talk Saves Lives. There's general content that is shared for each, but targeting it to the specific audience is also really important. I mentioned the Finding Hope program. I remember my first year co-chairing what was then a lived experience community before we wrapped it into formally to the broad elements of what AFSP does just on a routine basis. Being asked several times, why don't we have a program to teach people who are struggling how to get help and how to help people who are struggling? And we do now. And it's a really great program. The Finding Hope program, it says 90-minute presentation, but I actually think it's 2.5 hours. I think that's the shortest we've been able to get it in. It's a great program, really important discussion. I went through a training process to be trained to present it. I'm also a youth and teen mental health first aid instructor, so I get some added support from things that I've gotten that, but the AFSP training was really great at helping prepare for that. We also require that there's a mental health professional be in the room because those discussions, one of which we did in the pilot just in another room at this hotel, can become very emotional because as we're talking about the struggles our loved ones are going through, it can be difficult. So we have a mental health professional who takes part in that to be able to be supportive. The Supporting Those at Risk is a condensed down version that leaves out some of the pieces that might drive more of an emotional reaction that we are able to do virtually. We are reluctant to do the full program virtually when we leave people without some support and help in that room and that ability to get community support and engagement from those who are close to them. We can also provide that version in person. We have had for a long time the It's Real college students in mental health. There is a significant need to reach our college student community, and there always has been. There has also always been a need in the teen program, and we had a More Than Sad program for teens, which really had lost its connection with the audience because the cell phones that showed up in the videos were about 15 years old and they were full-size bricks. And the kids would see that and start laughing and dismiss the rest of the program. So It's Real Teens in Mental Health, we have presented it as a chapter. I've presented it to thousands of 8th graders and high school students in the city and the suburbs and downstate and a number of communities downstate. A lot of our educators are coming to us saying, our kids are in crisis. Can you do something to help them? And what I love about the program, it focuses on what they can do to help themselves, all the elements of self-care that can make a difference, even basics like sleep and exercise that they don't know is part of good mental health. How do you notice when your friends are struggling? How do you have a conversation with that? And how do you get adults involved? So we don't want teens thinking you have to fix your friends. You're not professionals. None of you went to medical school. None of you have your degrees in psychology. So it's about connecting people, listening to them, letting them know they're supported, but then getting adults involved and help. And that's been our most requested program, certainly for the last year. And there's nothing that suggests that that's going to drop off anytime soon. So a lot of times when we experience traumas, the effects can linger for a long time. So I think we're still a ways away from beginning the recovery, especially for young adults. We have some other. So for the first time, we have a program that's designed for elementary age students, for 3rd and 4th grade students. It's called Gizmo. It's Gizmo's Possum Guide to Mental Health. Gizmo is a dog, a super cute dog, in fact. And it's really about helping those introduce concepts of mental health to the young adults and helping them think about what can they do to feel better. And there is some engagement with how do you get the parents or guardians involved in supporting their young adults with the right kinds of behaviors. We continue to provide More Than Sad to parents and educators. We don't always use the videos, but the parents and educators aren't as turned off by the old cell phones as kids are. There's great content in there. And to give you an idea of what impact it has, I did a presentation in a downstate community for the educators. And they had initially invited us to also come talk to the girls in the school. After going through More Than Sad for educators, they realized that boys have mental health issues as well. They didn't realize the suicide rates were so high among young men. They thought that we just needed to reach the girls and would cover it. So you would think that education, some of this would be obvious, but that's because we spend time on it. It's not necessarily obvious in every area. Parents, it's hard to get parents to show up for presentations, but I've noticed over the last year a bigger percentage of parents are showing up. They're starting to recognize that their kids might be struggling. And then we have a new program called Soul Shop that is really aimed at integrating and weaving mental health concepts into the clergy. And a new version that's coming, Soul Shop for Black churches in particular, to really make sure that we're training the clergy on how what they're teaching works with the mental health concept. And we know from research that spiritual connection can be a protective factor. There's a community involvement element. There is a focus on others element. There's a part of a broader purpose element that can be really important to some people. There are other ways to get those, but it can be really integrated in those communities as well.
Okay, so Angela mentioned this in her presentation. There are a few people who joined us, though, after her presentation, just a few. And just want to, again, reiterate what this is. It's a initiative from the national AFSP. It was a concept born many years ago, I think like 2014. They rolled it out in 2015, or enunciated it. But it is a nationwide initiative to reduce the annual suicide rate 20% by the year 2025. And as I said, by the time of the final statistics for 2025. Project 2025 is built on 4 areas. Okay? Instead of focusing, as we do, say, in our education programs, most of the education programs, especially the early ones, are based on demographics, right? Kids of a certain age, kids of this age, teens, college students, right? LGBTQ plus folks, that's a demographic. And traditionally, that's how many organizations dealing with suicide prevention and mental health have based their prevention education on. But what AFSP found through rigorous research and application of what the data showed is that there will be the greatest impact in the fastest time possible by focusing on where people interact with others and are at risk. So we know that firearms, 51% of all suicides are by firearms. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Healthcare systems is another focus area, emergency departments, and corrections. So when you see the homicide rate, for example, in Chicago, which is high, okay, when you see the death by gun rate, 2/3 of those deaths are suicides. We need to face the reality that the Second Amendment is the law, right? The right to bear arms. That's the reality. And there are many communities where every single household has at least one firearm. That's the way it is, right? You meet people where they are. What folks who use firearms need is education to store their firearms safely, right? Safely meaning, a gun storage locker is an example that has a code that a child or a teenager can't figure out, okay? And separating the firearm from the ammo. Is this going to work with every firearm owner? No. Okay. But will it work with some if they're educated? Sure. Because just like you put your bleach when you go cleaning, you put it back, right, in the cabinet, the child-proof cabinet that the kid can't get to, we need to do that with firearms as well. We partnered a couple of years ago with the National Shooting Sports Federation, which is not a group of individual firearms owners, but they are a trade association, if you will, for range owners and firearm retailers. And they are totally on board with this concept of safety education for firearms owners, right? It's bad, if nothing else, it's bad press for them if somebody, who goes to their range, takes their life on their range, or in the store, or, bought the firearm at such and such a. So they're behind this. And in fact, if you go into most of the retailers of firearms nowadays that are part of this association, you will see the joint booklet that AFSP and the National Shooting Sports Federation came out with. Okay. So we're doing work in that area. And of course, we know that's a really critical area to be focusing our attention on. Healthcare systems. Okay, so here's an interesting statistic that we learned in the decision-making process of what areas to focus on. Up to 45% of people who die by suicide have visited their primary care physician in the month before they die. So there's an opportunity to get screened, right? Unfortunately, primary care physicians think that, at best, that having a question on their intake form of, have you thought about suicide in the last month? Have you had depression in the last month? That's sufficient. It isn't sufficient. So we have partnered with one, and we may be doing it with other organizations. This is an organization called SafeSide. And what they do is they have physician-specific training to help educate primary care physicians and other physicians in being able to recognize where there is a risk for suicidal ideation, for depression, where there's a person who's in need of some mental health attention. And it gives them not only the ability to recognize, not to treat, right? They're not the treater typically, but to recognize it and then how to deal with that issue, how to ask the question of patients, have you thought about suicide? By the way, if any of you still holds the thought, that myth that asking about suicide leads somebody to think about suicide, we know through research that that is a myth. In fact, when you ask about suicide directly and without judgment, compassionately but directly, we can save lives. And I can tell you just a quick story. It's my favorite story. Okay, I have a lot of favorite stories. But this one, I used to go, before the pandemic, I would train the cadre of nursing students at a university in Chicago. And so I went one year and I presented It's Real, which Mike talked about, that film for college students because they were nursing students. And we also did more than Talk Saves Lives, the general edition. Okay. And part of what we learn there is, of course, that you ask directly about suicide. Okay. Year goes by, do that, come back to that same, a new group of nursing students, but the same instructor who said, after I learned by what you taught us that I need to say, ask directly, are you considering suicide? Are you thinking about suicide? She said, I run a postpartum depression support group for new mothers, okay? And she said, and someone in my class said, you need to talk to my sister. And she brought in her sister to this nursing instructor, and this woman had also just given birth, and she was talking, the instructor was talking with her about her mental health challenges, and she asked, do you ever think about suicide? And the woman said, all the time. So the sister and the instructor took her immediately to the hospital, and she spent several weeks there. And then the instructor, several months before this second training I did, said she received a lengthy handwritten note from the woman saying, thank you for saving my life. Okay. And so the instructor said to me, before your training, I would never have asked, are you thinking of suicide? But that's the magic, those are the magic words. So I want all of you to be able to say those magic words too. So, SafeSide enables physicians to feel comfortable asking that kind of a question. Okay? And in Illinois, we are working tireless behind the scenes. I don't want to give away names, but with a major government agency, possibly to implement this in their healthcare system. So these are major healthcare systems. And of course, it costs some money, and that is one instance where we will be doing the grant. We will be paying for healthcare systems, this one, to get SafeSide training. Emergency departments. So we have a partnership with the National Association of Emergency Physicians. Why do we do that? Because we know that 39% of people who die by suicide make an emergency department visit in the year prior to their death. Again, this is how data helps inform what we do as suicide prevention educators. Okay? So we are partnering with them, and we will be rolling out, similar to SafeSide, a program so that folks who are under the stressful conditions of an emergency room, right? The docs, the nurses, the people who are on the gurneys, and anybody who touches has a face-to-face opportunity with a patient, somebody who's coming into the department, to have them hyper alert in an informed way about mental health risk. Okay? Again, we're going to where folks are rather than the demographics. We do that too, but this is different. And then finally, corrections. And of course, Mike talked a bit about correction systems. We know that suicide is the leading cause of death in jails. It's also increased 30% in prisons in recent years. There should never be a point where someone who is incarcerated should be able to take their own life. People so what we do is we do training so that at every single touch point, when somebody's coming into the prison, when they're seen by medical personnel and screened, and so on and so forth, that the guards know, right? All of the corrections-related folks have had training on how to look at risk. Now, in some places, just as an example, the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Chicago, it's been said, and not without cause, that that's the largest mental health facility in the nation. And that's because so many people who have mental health issues, spend time there. Okay? Well, is that helpful to just spend time there without, getting them to be seen, getting them at least recognized as having a mental health issue? No. So there's a lot of work to be done, but this is one of the ways we're going about it, is education. Okay, firearms. I talked about this, safe storage, temporary removal of firearms. We need to educate the firearms community on how we spot it. We work with healthcare systems, and by the way, if you live in a community, I just was talking with someone yesterday who would like us to bring our SafeSide training to hospitals in Iroquois County and Kankakee County. If you have an in with a major healthcare system, please let us know so we can work on encouraging them to also learn about the SafeSide training. Emergency departments, okay? We, again, by educating, we can equip emergency room physicians and staff with suicide prevention tools. And it's not just the recognition, they also need to know what to do once you've recognized that there's an issue, right? Because we know that implementation is where people fall down, right? They identify the risk and then they shove it off, but there needs to be follow-up. And follow-up is key for everyone who leaves some sort of a facility. And again, corrections, I talked about their strategy. So now it's advocacy. And yes, question. So the question was from a therapist, and she has had patients, clients, who have ended up having to go to the emergency room, and they've been treated like criminals, which is part of, right? So they're treated like, they have guards on them, which is actually, I think, for their own protection as well as that of, other staff. But is there a way to not make them feel so stigmatized and singled out? Are we working on that? The answer is, I don't know. Okay. Is it a good idea? Yes. I don't know whether that would be part of the training, but it sure makes sense that that would be. Okay. We don't have our training up yet for emergency departments, but having heard this question, I can now relay it to our Project 2025 team at National to ensure that this question, this comment, is recognized by them in how they go about delivering the training. Yes? People used to say committed suicide. There are multiple reasons why we try not to use that term anymore. We just say took their own life, died by suicide, killed themselves. In other words, more straightforward. When you use committed suicide, it conjures up, it's a word of judgment. It conjures up, you commit a murder, you commit a robbery, you commit like it's some sort of a crime, which we want to destigmatize. But it also implies a state of mental health that we know that people who die by suicide at the time that they are attempting, they are like with blinders, they are so single-mindedly focused on the death that they're not fully engaged. If you handed them a contract to sign then and there, okay, and they signed it, they weren't in a state of mind to be signing that contract, right? It's like, as they say in Talk Saves Lives, if someone were having a heart attack, okay, would you ask them for directions? If they gave you directions at that point, they wouldn't be able to. And they don't have that rational ability to see past the moment that they're in, if that makes sense. Anything else? That's a great question. We have done a very abbreviated version of Talk Saves Lives for going into the district police headquarters and doing it during shift changes. So we have done that as well. Okay. And then the third one we'll talk about.
Okay, thanks, boss. I'm just going to take a few minutes now to talk about advocacy. But first of all, I want to add my thanks to what you all do. You guys are the key to what we can do. And this is an area that we really need help in right now. This is sort of the hot area at the moment, what we're trying to do. This is where you can sign up online. Advocacy is not that hard anymore because everything is sort of digitized. You just put your name down there. They'll do the whole letter for you. You'll just add your name, a little brief story about your own situation, and boom, it goes right to your legislators, both federal and state level. So it's really easy. Now, I'm not saying it's the best way to communicate with them because they all know they get all these postcards or digital messages, but it helps. It shows that there's somebody out there that cares. And of course, you can always write your own letter if you want to. Here's where it's at right now. 988 is what we're working on right now. It's going to be implemented in July of this year. Now, it's had a little bit of a history. I'm not sure exactly how much you need to know about this, but it began back in October of 2020 when the legislation was passed federally, and the legislation provided that the FCC said that we can use the 988 number. So you all know about the suicide prevention Lifeline, I assume. You see it in football games now. You see it when there's stories in the news about suicide or people with mental health problems. Well, that's going to be replaced by 988. So when the switch is flipped in July, if you can still call the 1-800 number, but if you call 988, it's going to go right to this suicide prevention Lifeline. But there's a little bit more to this now. It's not just what has happened in the past where there's somebody to talk to. this is sort of a more robust kind of approach to mental health. It's like 911. You know, when you call 911, you're going to get a response. But you can only get one response. You can get the 911 operator will summon law enforcement. If it's a mental health situation, law enforcement is obligated then to transport you to the emergency room. So this is the theory that's been developed over a period of time, and it's a good one, and we want it to happen, but it's going to take a lot of work. So what the program now, it's 3 parts. It's someone to talk to, that's the crisis call center. And they'd like this to be implemented statewide and nationally also, but state by state. So right now, for example, in Illinois, there's 6 of these crisis response centers that will take your call. And some of them are 24/7, but most of them are not. We want that to happen universally as soon as possible. And it's going to take a lot of work to get it there because it's a lot of manpower. And the crisis response centers they want to have a professional counselor there and a peer counselor there, if at all possible. Now, they're saying that 80+% of the calls that come in are handled on the phone, which we'll see if that continues to happen going forward, but that's at least the data so far. Also, they want to implement these crisis mobile response teams, which is a 2-person team that will actually go to the person at their location as opposed to a 911 police officer response. So some states have already adopted this co-response situation, which is not what we want to see. We'd like to have it so that the police officers do not have to respond unless it's a situation that requires a police presence. And this is an important part of the whole program and something that, you know, is aspirational at the moment, but we'll see if it happens. The third part of this is some kind of crisis receiving and stabilization centers. These are not hospitals for the most part. Some of you may have heard of living rooms, which are being implemented on a countywide basis, which is essentially a provision where you can go for a short period of time, less than 24 hours, in sort of a recliner kind of situation, which would be a step up from the crisis response teams, but less than sort of being hospitalized. So that's the plan. Now, how is that going to happen? Well, in Illinois, I'll speak to Illinois first of all. The Illinois Department of Human Services, the Department of Mental Health, is the administrator of the 988 program in Illinois. And some of us, Dimple and myself and Steve, are on a group that is trying to implement this. It's the stakeholders group, and we're trying to figure out how this is going to happen statewide. The good part about this, though, is it's happening at a time when there's money available. So in the state of Illinois has received a grant to set up this statewide administrative call center. What that means is that it's a backup. If the call isn't answered by a local crisis response program, it goes to the statewide backup. This group called PATH has just received a multi-million-dollar grant to set it up. It's in Bloomington. They're hiring 150 new people right now, and they're supposed to be ready to go by July. So if anybody has any interest. Also, I know for a fact in Lake County, we have a crisis response center set up by the Lake County Health Department, and they're looking for people now. They're looking for people every shift. You can work full-time, you can work part-time, you can work any different shift, and they need people both to answer the phones and to set up these crisis response teams. So there's work out there. There's some qualifications. You're supposed to have a bachelor's degree in psychology or sociology, and they have some training. But if you're interested, there's work to be done. Now, this is where the advocacy comes in. This is what we need to do. The idea is a wonderful one. Everybody agrees with the concept. The police officers agree with the concept. They don't want to be going. They don't want to be putting these people in jail. Why would the Cook County Jail want to be a mental health institution? It doesn't make sense. But how to get there? It's going to require money. The first and easiest way to this is if we can implement a fee similar to the 911 fee. If you look at your phone bill, you probably in Illinois pay $1.15 or something a month as a 911 fee. and this is the most stable way to finance this kind of operation, is to add that fee on for 988. The initial legislation in Congress said that the states can implement this, but only 4 states have implemented it so far. So that's where the advocacy comes in. The state of Illinois is passed legislation in general terms approving of this type of operation, but it didn't fund it. So that's the kind of work we need to do. Now, it can be funded with general revenue funds, but that's not a long-term solution. The long-term solution is to raise the money necessary, and they're estimating something from 100 to 120 million a year is going to be needed to set up this program just in Illinois. And so that's what we're working on. We could also get funding. We want to convince insurance companies that this is something they should cover, just like they cover, in some instances, transportation to emergency rooms. In some instances, we want it to be covering the transportation to whatever the mental health facility is in our case. That's basically what it is. If anybody has any questions, I'll be in the back. I'd be happy to talk about it. You're going to see, if you're signed up as an advocate, you'll see some information about this coming down the pike, and we ask you to do what you can to help. If you know anybody that's interested in working in one of these crisis response centers, that would help also. Oh, the other thing is they say that 90% of the people don't know that 988 is coming, so anything you can do to publicize this is also very helpful. Okay, thank you very much.
So my name is Dimple Patel, and I'm the co-chair along with Beth, Ann, and Meg. We started our DEI committee last year, and we slowly have been getting our feet wet within certain topics that we want to discuss. And this is an area that I jumped on the opportunity to be a co-chair for. It's something that's close to my heart, but also what I do clinically. I am a therapist. I work in private practice. I work with kids, teenagers, and young adults right now. And so with all of that, our DEI committee has been working towards increasing and having more conversations that we normally typically wouldn't have. Sometimes they may be uncomfortable, but they're also needed, and we need to have these conversations. And just along with a lot of my training and my clinical training that I've had through my practicums, I've seen a lot of conversations that need to be had, but in grad school, the only diversity class that we have is only one. And a lot of my training and everything I get is hands-on experience through my training sites, even if that's there. And so I am very thankful for the supervisors I've had that have implemented DEI or even diversity topics within our training and supervisions. And so through our DEI committee, we've been hosting quarterly panels, and if anyone ever wants to be a participant or has ideas, please feel free to find me. I can give you my email address within that. But one of the things I really wanted to stress, I know we're in a limited time, but it's very important that we talk about and take an unbiased and uncompromisingly anti-racist and equitable approach to improve access to culturally informed and evidence-based quality mental health care. And the culturally informed therapy, or even a culturally competent therapist, is extremely crucial, because even for myself, I at the age of 21 had a panic attack, and I was at DePaul University, and I went into their counseling services, and they asked me if I wanted a South Asian therapist. I said, heck no. I didn't want somebody from my cultural background, just because of the stigma and shame associated within it. And at that time, I didn't know about confidentiality. But I was a newbie within it, but it ended up being such a blessing in disguise. They're like, try it and see how it goes. And I did, and it was actually the best thing I ever did. And because of that, I ended up going to get my doctorate in clinical psychology. And what helped the most was that I didn't have to say certain things. I could explain it, and I didn't have to tell her what it meant. She understood where it was coming from without judgment, and with that modern approach too. But unfortunately for my mom, it wasn't the same aspect of her. I lost my mom to suicide in 2011, so it's about like 11 years now. But even though we were both born in India, we were raised in two different cultures. And especially in a lot of my unrepresentative communities, it's that first session. Even after that first session, if they're not connecting, if they don't feel that support, or even if there's slight judgment, they will not return. And that's that biggest part too. I always say, like, for anybody going to therapy, we're working for you. And please ask those questions. If you have that worry or you're feeling judgment or anything, like, bring that up, because that is an important conversation that can actually facilitate even further growth within your therapeutic relationship, and you don't end that relationship and you can continue on. But also within AFSP, we're working towards are committed to that change within our culture and reverse the impact of systemic racism within the field of mental health. Being on that clinical side of training, I have seen it. I've had to advocate for in trainings too, of, like, just because the Asian culture has certain different beliefs and systems and how family dynamics are, that's a huge part, especially in the Hispanic community, Indian community, Asian community. Family is a big component part of the process, and you can't just say, oh, have you tried talking to your parents about this? That's not really gonna work. And so you have to be mindful of that part too, just not as clinical therapist, but also how you're approaching it too. Even, for example, yes, in my clinical setting, if I'm assessing for risk, I will take a different approach, but I'll also be mindful of, like, am I going to directly say the word suicide? Is that going to impact them more? Or can I use other alternative forms to come and respect their cultural backgrounds and kind of have those conversations? But it's also, yes, be okay with also asking, are you going to hurt yourself? Are you going to have these conversations with them? And what we're also noticing too is that we all have a role to play, not just as therapists, but everybody in the community. And wanting to have those individuals, communities, organizations, and other leaders to join us in creating this long-lasting changes in mental health and equity to prevent suicide among underrepresented communities. And that's why I started speaking up, not just from my own background, but if you look at my social media, it's outgoing, bubbly, all these different things. But, after my car accident, my panic attack, like, no one of my friends was talking about mental health. And after losing my mom, I started to notice that generational pattern of mental health within the family that was never talked about. But I speak about it in an I perspective, my perspective, and my mom's perspective. And kind of seeing that other girls that look like me, or other South Asian women, or even younger girls coming up that are feeling this way, but need somebody to step that way forward or normalize that. And because of that part, I've noticed such an increase in private messages of, hey, can you help me, like, find a therapist for my dad, or for my friend, or how do I go and talk to somebody within this, or their family, to normalize it for their parents. I'm seeing the younger generation talking more and more about these. And the other thing too, even just like with equity and inclusion too, we are Beth and Ann, who are not here today, are in Southern Illinois, and we want to be able to incorporate our entire state, not just up north, but everyone. And so we're working to also expand our reach by supporting our communities in the lower counties in Illinois where health disparities exist and there's fewer resources. So being able to access that, or even in Chicago too. I have, in my clinical role, I have kids I've heard, or friends talk about their friends who want to go to therapy, but their parents might dismiss it, or they might not value it, or like, you're fine, and things like that. And that was said to me. And so I went to therapy in secret. And if you know anybody, like, advise them to go to their college counseling centers. At DePaul, it was like $5 sessions for 20 sessions, or even like your school counselors. But there's that fear of, what if my parents find out, or that risk piece of things, and having to be really honest about it. I'm noticing that more and more kids are wanting to go seek support, and how Kara talked about within primary care settings and doctors. I do want to say that I'm seeing, like, yes, we need a lot of that training, but even for clinicians too, for suicide prevention and advocacy, and seeing that it's out there. A couple of my patients filled out those questionnaires when they went for their annual physical, and their primary care doctors had that discussion with them and their parents, and that's what got them into therapy. And that was a 12-year-old. And I'm also working as kids with as young as 6 years old and parents. And so it's a big community part of it, and being mindful that it's not just one person, but it's a whole systemic part of it too, and other resources, and also not a lot of places accept Medicaid. And so that can also put a lot of people, individuals who want support, but where do I find it? Currently, there's a lot of wait lists going on. But looking into your local county or community mental health centers, I'd say even if it's a long wait, put yourself on the wait list, trying to get those out there. One of the things, I'm much better behind the screen, it's where I love to be, but these are some things that I've been able to do, just part of DEI. I mostly moderate our panel discussions, and the one to the very left with Dr. Jenny and I, that was through an Instagram Live. She has a great book coming out. Please look it up if you ever can Google her. But we talked about dissociality and support within the Asian community, which is something that is not talked about as much, even though, yes, India is a part of Asia, and that's a part that still needs to be represented and talked about. And when I was doing my dissertation research, I had to be very specific on how I was searching, like Asian Indian or South Asian, to be able to find the data that I needed for the community that I represent. But overall underlying themes are very similar. That family, the stigma, the shame, and also even that, well, what are other people going to think? That's a big part, especially in that diversity piece of it, even as a therapist or even anybody, teachers, counselors, anybody coming in, being mindful of the cultural background of an individual. And if you don't know, it's okay to ask. I ask my patients all the time, I don't know this, I may have similar backgrounds, but please explain this to me, or can you tell me a little bit more and give me feedback if I don't understand. And one of our other panels that we've done is race, stigma, and mental health. And the more recent one we did was the disabilities and mental health, which was a great conversation. And then we're going to be having one in the fall, going for related to going back to school and IEPs, 504s, how helping parents understand. So we're already planning ahead within that part of things. And then my next one is, sorry, one second. But I also wanted, if you guys ever get a chance, and do you want to watch all of our panels? You can just go to YouTube and just type in AFSP Illinois IL, and you'll find all of our DEI panels that we've done. But also you'll find a lot of other different videos. There's other Talk Saves Lives on there if you want to get familiarized with yourself of, like, seeing somebody else that's presented and you want to see what the structure is like. That's also on there, and there's other walks that are on there as well that have been recorded. And so you can find me on there, and I will send you all that information. And then I think we have a little video. Yep. But yeah, if you have any other questions, please let me know.
Certain ethnic groups there's more stigma associated with thinking and talking about, disclosing your experience of any kind of mental health issues, suicide risk. Some of these groups that are experiencing these things, they're less likely to seek care. So how do you reach that population? Reach them where they are, right? So for example, one of the things I'm part of a group, the Black Mental Health Alliance, and they've actually taken to the hairdresser store, to the barber shop, because that's where these people will show up, and they're talking to them and they're coming together and as a community talking about their feelings and experience of depression. And so it makes it easier for them to speak about it when it's in a less formal setting, and as long as there's somebody there to facilitate that process and kind of help them. I just think it's really, really important for us to reach those individuals where they are, understand that culture matters.
First place, you can go on to the AFSP.org website, and there are mini videos. They're like 3 to 5 minutes with some of the researchers that AFSP has given grant money to over the years. And they talk about different aspects about mental health, brain science, what else? Treatments, right? Exactly. So it's I think they've I think they've rotated out some of them, but the ones that I've seen, there are about 70-something videos on there. So that's a good place to start. In terms of learning some of the more technical aspects of the research, please come to our research connections, because you're going to see folks who are AFSP researchers, in the sense that they've been given some grant money. And the great thing I just want to say about AFSP's researchers are they often take the grant money and do some research, and from the research that they got with our seed money, they're able to go and get much larger grants to do additional research, which is just, that's exactly what we want. And we're also at AFSP at a point where we are going out and asking people to do research. So we've learned enough now. We're at the point where we know, we really need to know more about X. And we are now approaching researchers and saying, let's learn more about X. Okay, does that help? They do diverge. It doesn't, that kind of understanding usually comes over time. So you get the data, not me, get the data. Okay, the researchers, the folks, our research department at AFSP is led by the ultra-capable Jill Harkavy-Friedman, Dr. Friedman, who is the kind of person who can look at trends, look at data, and put it together and figure out what additional research needs to be done and understand it. But in terms of intersectionality, that's above my pay grade, but it's certainly something I'm sure that AFSP addresses in all of their work. We do, I send to the board members articles, not necessarily from AFSP, but articles, some of them based on legitimate scientific methods that address specific issues of the type that you're talking about. Okay, the National Violent Death Reporting System. Well, yeah, and just to put one point on that, and then we do need to wrap up, is that when at the time that my daughter died by suicide, I went to my first AFSP conference in 2009 in DC, and at that point, the National Violent Death Reporting System was implemented, had only been implemented in maybe 3 handfuls of states. Now it is everywhere. Not surprisingly, that initiative, the National Violent Death Reporting System, had been fought for years by the NRA, and that's because obviously there's a huge amount of, there's a huge role that firearms plays in suicide. So, but we're all part of it now. There's been, I have to tell you, as somebody who is a loss survivor, we have come so far via science. It's all the science. It's science and data, and we're only going to. It's increasing. It's becoming more rapid, and we're doing great things at AFSP. So, hope you join us as a volunteer in our efforts.